Let me say this. One theme that was in the book that I think we need to spend a lot more time thinking about is how we get information. So you recall I wrote up a little bit these studies on vaccine misinformation and the fact that Russia didn't just push anti-vax message. Often what they would do is they would push an anti-vax message and a pro-vax message at the same people because the point was just to get you at each other's throats. And I think a lot of that's happened recently. Yes, they had a preferred presidential candidate. But their biggest objective wasn't for one side to win. It was to break down our trust. It turns out all the nuclear weapons in the world are not capable of doing what this information vector into our society did with shocking efficiency. And we're behind. I don't just mean like those who are on my side of the political spectrum are behind. I think America's behind. Here's something to think about in terms of trust. For the last 100 years, it's been possible to more or less decisively settle a question with photographic evidence, right? If you're trying to prove whether a thing happened or not, if you're trying to establish whether somebody's telling the truth or lying, in politics, in the courtroom, whatever, one of the best tools you could use to try to establish the truth was a photo. That's basically not true anymore, or it's about to be not true, right? The AI stuff is so sophisticated. We're kind of getting out of the period where already with the deep fakes and stuff, we're kind of graduating out of that. Now, on one level, that's terrifying because it's one symptom of the fact that right now we have never had more information and we've never been less informed, right? That's the result of the information bombardment we're living with and the having our news feed be decided by an algorithm instead of an editor, right? On the other hand, if that was true for the last 100 years, then that means it was not true for the thousands of years before the 1920s, right? So what do we do before that? I mean, we had signatures as a means of authentication. It's useful, not exactly impossible to defeat, right? But there were people who helped figure out what was a forgery and what was real in the 17th century, right? So we've got to be harder targets for this misinformation stuff. And we've got to recognize that sometimes the misinformation that comes at us won't just be designed to attack a person. It will be designed to attack our trust itself. We just lived this in a huge way in Hurricane Helene response. And there's only a couple solutions I know of. One is to get things and people offline. Again, I think this is a mayor's instinct. You run into somebody at the dog park and they're the same person who is just horrible from behind a keyboard, but you're actually talking to them, they're not so bad. I did with Elon. I mean, I don't know if you followed this, like he texted this thing, or he tweeted this thing that wasn't true about the FAA, and I just asked him to call me, and then he did, and then we solved the problem. I'm under no illusions about the bigger picture, but that happened, right? So one is try to find people offline when they're better than when they're online. The other is to actually understand the dynamics of the information space. And this is a message I have in particular for young people who are ready to make yourself useful in the political and social life of this country. Because we've got to be harder targets. Look, I bet in the 17th century, if I was walking down Harvard Square, if we had a Harvard Square then, or outside of Massachusetts Hall, and somebody handed me a pamphlet that was printed on a printing press, I would have been pretty impressed. I would have been more inclined to believe it. Because not everybody has a printing press. This must be legit, right? And then over time, we became more sophisticated. I don't know if Gen Z even did. If you should find yourself reading a hard copy, well, you got my book. So if you find yourself reading a hard copy of Time Magazine or the New York Times or whatever, sometimes your eye falls on newsprint and it's designed to look like an article, but it's actually an ad. And it only takes your brain like half a second to realize it's an ad. You just have some pattern recognition that tells you, right? We don't have that at the same level on the digital stuff. And every time we form it, a new medium arises. We're going to have to figure out how to pick through that and really understand what's real and what's not real, right? That's the difference between the person who is correctly upset with the administration because we haven't solved their economic problem and the person who is happy with their economic circumstance but has been led to believe that unemployment is an all-time high in the United States of America, right? If we can at least be having politics over this, then it's over reality. And if we're getting dinged, it's because of something we actually got wrong. So I think those themes of trust and what we do in order to have access to the same reality matter more than ever. But I don't have the prescription, other than more time offline. And let me add one other thing, more circumstances that pull us offline. I think military service does this. I think any pattern of belonging that is not predicted by your political affiliation, that can be in a faith community, a neighborhood, a sports team, whatever. Find those, because those overlapping circles are really important. But the rest of it, not to put it back at you, is kind of what this generation is going to have to help us lead the way out of. Because my generation clearly can't figure it out.
Our generation.
But we have the outside enemy and we have the enemy from within.
Freedom is indivisible. And when one man is enslaved, all are not free.
For freedom is not the property of one generation. It's the obligation of this and every generation. It's our duty to protect it and expand it and pass it undiminished to those still unborn.